Okay, good evening, everyone. We do have a quorum now, right on time for our scheduled start of 6:30 p.m. this evening on Tuesday, July 23rd. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be here tonight. We have lots to get to, and with that, I'd like to call to order this July 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Wildwood School Building Committee to order. As always, we will take a roll call, and Vivian, if you can kindly help out, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Brand. Alice Brown LeGrand. Christine Holleran. Christine Pendergast.
Here.
Craig Miner. David Ragsdale.
Here.
Dennis Kelly.
Here.
Diane Allen.
Here.
Glenn Brand.
Here.
Greg Bendel.
Here.
John Holloway. Justin Couchot.
Here.
Kate Bissell. Kevin Kyra. Marianne Galezzo.
Here.
Michael Camosio.
Here.
Paul Melarani. Paul Ruggiero.
Here.
Stacy Scott. Judy O'Connell.
Here.
Nick Golden.
Here.
Eric Schlegel.
Here.
And myself present. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Vivian,
sir.
I also see that Kate Bissell is here, although I don't think you got a.
I did not get a response, but
Sorry. I'm here.
Okay, thanks, everyone, and thank you, Vivian, for helping with that. We will get right to our second item of business
Kate,
tonight.
if you're in attendance.
I am in attendance, but my microphone seems to not be
Great,
working.
thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Second item of business tonight is the approval of minutes from our June 25th meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the June 25th minutes.
So approved.
Second.
Second. With that, a roll call vote. Christine, did you have a question or comment?
Nope, showing you that I seconded.
Thank you. Vivian?
Christine Pendergast.
Yep.
David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Dennis Kelly.
Yes.
Diane Allen.
Yes.
Glenn Brand.
Yes.
Greg Bendel.
Yes.
Justin Couchet.
Yes.
Kate Bissell.
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo.
Yes.
Michael Camosio.
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Judy O'Connell.
Yes.
Nick Golden.
Yes.
Eric Schlegel.
Yes.
And I made the motion, so thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, everyone. The third item of business tonight is the approval of invoices, and specifically warrant number 14. I'll turn it over to Julie as our owner's project manager.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. I'm just going to share my screen so that everyone can see our two invoices for the evening. This is warrant article number 13 for services provided in the month of June. The first invoice is for SMMA for our monthly drawdown in the amount of $7,500. And then next up is Doran Whittier's invoice in the amount of $31,500 for their monthly drawdown. Total amount for warrant article number 13 is $39,000. And Dennis Kelly with the recommendation from the Finance Working Group.
I would like to make a motion to approve the two invoices, SMMA invoice number 6154 in the amount of $7,500 and Doran Whittier's invoice 00013 in the amount of $31,500 for a total dollar amount of $39,000.
Thank
I
you,
second.
Dennis. We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. With that, unless there are any questions or comments, we look for a roll call.
Absolutely. Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly, you made the motion. Diane Allen,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Greg Brendel,
Yes.
Justin Couche,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo,
Yes.
Michael Camosio,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Nick Golden,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
I think Eric dropped off the call, but I'm sure he's gonna log back on.
sure, and myself, yes. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Vivian, and thank you, everyone. We are going to move on to item number 4 tonight, which is really the central piece of this meeting tonight and the information update. Just a couple of things to share in context before I turn it over to our design team, Doran Whittier. This information is we are well aware, and I'm well aware as the chair of the committee sent out just earlier this afternoon. There's been an awful lot of activity in the last couple of business days, starting with Friday, when the project team received the cost estimates. You'll hear more about these in just a moment. I just want to make note of the fact that our design team, our owner's project manager team, has continues to meet regularly with the town administration as well as the school department administration. We know that they're hard at work at this, and in an ideal setting, I know that the information could have been disseminated ideally a little bit before tonight's meeting, earlier than today. That is certainly understood, and I share that desire as well too. I will point out, however, though, that aside from the actions that the committee just took on the warrants and the approval of minutes, there are no further actions that are being asked of the committee tonight. This is for informational purposes tonight. This will lead to an ultimate request of the committee to take action on this information at the August 20th meeting. But we want to bring you this. It's timely. It's hot off the press, and we want to allow our design team and our owner's project manager to bring everyone up to speed. So with that, I think, Ronnie, I'm turning over to you, correct?
Dr. Brand,
Mr. Bendel, yes.
thank you for that. And thank you for those comments. I agree with your sentiments. And I would just humbly request that we could, and I'll speak for myself, but if others want to agree, that's fine. And ahead of the August meeting, if we could try to request the information a few days prior instead of the day of. I think this is several times now we've asked for that information not to be sent out on the day of, but I think it'll be critical for the August meeting that we have any information in addition to what we'll hear tonight ahead of time.
Thanks for the comments, and certainly I completely understand. I don't know if Julie, as our OPM, if you want to speak to that.
No, completely understand where everyone's coming from. It definitely was not our intent to not share this information with you prior to earlier this afternoon. But we received our estimate on Friday. Doran Whittier and SMA worked to get this information provided to you. And then yesterday we met with the town's leadership, Judy O'Connell and Eric Schlegel, along with Dr. Brand and Paul Ruggiero, to put together the actual financial data that you're going to see this evening. And, we wish that we could have gotten it to you sooner. That estimate coming in on Friday was challenging, but Doran Whittier did work tirelessly over the weekend to make sure that this information was provided to you all this evening. Again, apologies, and we will do our very best for August. I don't anticipate us having much more information that it is as critical as this information is, and giving you this amount of time between now and August 20th to really sit with this information and is really what's going to help us define the future of this project. So we hear your concerns. It definitely is our goal to get you your presentations within 48 hours.
Thank you.
Julie, just to follow up on that, maybe moving forward, if we're getting to this point might be beneficial to maybe postpone the meeting a few days, just to give the committee enough time to digest what they're seeing.
Sure, we can definitely, we can look at that.
Yeah, I think it's just, the right thing for the committee to look at it, to, form any sort of questions we might have. I mean, it's really hard at this point to even ask questions since we've only had this for about 3 hours.
Understandable. Yeah, we talked about this in our leadership meeting today about, what we thought was a good plan to move forward. Knowing that you only had about 3 hours to look at this and understanding that you may have questions, we are definitely open to anyone sending and emailing us on the side between now and August 20th, any questions that you may have, and we can share them with this entire group so that people don't feel like they're being left out of the conversation.
Thank you for the comments, folks. And with that, Ronnie, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Dr. Brand. So, with this phase, we have 9 options that we carried from PDP into the PSR phase. The main adjustments from PDP to PSR included reduction in the program square footage for each of the grade configurations, as well as more detailed site plans that were developed. The highlighted options are those that were shortlisted by the SBC at the end of the PDP phase. We put together slides that have the site plans with the floor plans in preparation for the public meeting on August 7th. This is the pre-K 5 N1 option, new construction of a 3-story building that's located behind the existing building on the North Intermediate site. In PSR, the floor plans are more refined to adjust the layout based on the programmatic changes. We look to improve public and private zones, adjacencies of spaces and their locations, looking at travel distance for, from a safety and code standpoint. So we look at working on all of those as part of this phase in each of the options that you'll see. For each of the options, we also studied the site plans. We incorporated more grading information that we were able to obtain. We looked at feedback from our meeting with the public safety officials to improve circulation for daily use as well as during emergency situations. We looked at this at the last meeting, but I just brought this up, just to highlight this today before we look at all of the evaluation matrix and the cost. For example, here at North, we improved the bus and vehicle separation in the PSR phase and looked at completely separating those for pickup and drop off, and then also considered an alternate pickup scenario when possible, so that there would be longer queuing on site during pickup, which may not be as necessary during drop-off. So those were a couple of things that we worked through during the PSR phase to better refine each of the options.
Ronnie, if I could just add to that, one of the recurring questions that has been coming up revolves around traffic study and potential traffic impacts at any of these sites that we're considering. And we've discussed this at previous meetings that we are going to be doing a traffic study, and the budgeted allowance for this would be taking place during the schematic design phase. And so that would be one of the first efforts that we do once we select a preferred option. But ahead of that, and having worked on MSBA projects for a long time, we understand in the traffic study, and we've done them on all of our projects, the single largest element that the traffic study is always illustrating to us is we need to figure out how to get the cars off the road and onto the site into queue lanes. So we've had that in mind in the development of each of these sites, as one of our biggest concerns is the ability for the site to be able to handle enough queuing traffic to be able to alleviate traffic concerns out on the main road. So all of these sites have been incorporated and designed to be able to pull the maximum number of cars off of the road and onto the site during drop-off and pickup times. The traffic study, once we get it completed, will also direct us to any potential off-site mitigation efforts that we need to also help alleviate. So the cost for those have been embedded into the cost estimates that we're going to present to you tonight. We've been trying to take a proactive approach to that challenge on the development, and we're thinking about it as we're developing all of these sites. But there will be obviously a traffic study done on the preferred site, as well as geotechnical investigation, so we understand a little bit better about what's happening underground as well. I just wanted to add that point.
Thanks, Lee. This is the pre-K 5 add renovations, and this resulted in a 4-story building on the North Intermediate site. Both pre-K 5 options also include the larger 12,000 square foot gymnasium in the programs. The pre-K 3 enrollment new construction at Woburn Street is a 2-story building located just north of the existing building on the Woburn Street site. This option also has some significant walls, retaining walls, but it does take advantage of the grade in that from High Street and Woburn Street, it looks like a 1-story building, and the second story is somewhat recessed into the site, if you will, because it's taking advantage of the grades. The pre-K 3 add reno option includes renovations and additions, resulting in a 3-story building on the Woburn Street site. So this one would have a view of a 2-story building from the main street, but in actuality, it is 3 stories. And in both pre-K 3 options, the pre-K and K population is on the lower levels to give them direct access to grade. The pre-K K new option includes new construction of a 1-story building on the Wildwood site. And in the PSR phase, we were able to adjust the layout to provide and improve the public and private separation for potential community use of the building. And this is the add renovation, and this was also a 1-story building on the Wildwood site. So the evaluation matrix, this is developed as a tool for the school building committee to utilize as you're evaluating the 9 options. We developed the 8 categories that you see on the screen during the PDP phase, and we continue to use those categories to evaluate each of the options. Each option was rescored based on the criteria that we established in the previous phase. And your packet today has an expanded matrix with scoring for each of the criteria within the categories. And any changes from PDP scoring are in red for ease of reference. The overall scoring was consistent with PDP findings, even with adjustments based on revised layouts and revised site developments. The highest scoring alternative was still the new pre-K 5 school at the North Intermediate site, followed by the pre-K 5 add reno and the new pre-K 3 at the Woburn Street site. Before I move on to cost, are there any questions on the evaluation matrix?
I did have a quick question, just to clarify, total time here, is that like, are we rating higher for shorter length of work? Like what, just a little more clarity on that.
Sure. So the total time is reflective of how long it's taking to address all the needs of the pre-K 5 population. So in this scenario, then any of the options that include the population of pre-K 5 would score higher. The pre-K 3 scores slightly lower because it does not address the grades 4 and 5 in that option. And then pre-K K scored lowest because it was only addressing pre-K and K. And then the repair only options at the pre-K 3 and pre-K 5, those 2 options don't address the entire population and don't include pre-K K regardless. So they're just addressing the existing school population, which is why they also scored lower.
Thank you.
Ronnie, I have a couple of questions. Noticing, so looking at the North Intermediate site, in the community category, the ad reno scored, a little more than a point higher than the new construction. And can you explain why that was?
Sure. Give me 1 second to reference.
Sure. So and I'm looking at so there's a 10.0 listed for the ad reno option and an 8.9 listed for the new option for new construction.
Okay, so both of them scored, so there was 2 criteria under that category, and they both scored equally on the public and private separation within the building. But the pre-K 5 ad reno scored slightly higher because the library was located more, was on the main level, so it was easily accessible for the community as one of the spaces, and some of the other spaces similar to that, like art and music, they're just closer to the main entrance. So it just scored slightly higher, which when you added both together and averaged it, it ended up giving the ad reno a slightly higher score.
Christine? Oh, sorry, David, did you have another
Nope.
question?
No, I'll hold for Christine.
Christine?
Ronnie, on the restrictions, why does the North Intermediate score 11.1 as a repair option versus 10? What would trigger that up?
So, so with the repair only option, because we're not making major site improvements, we weren't impacting potentially the wetlands on the southwest side. So the repair only option doesn't actually impact the site as much as the other options did. So it scored higher.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions before we move on from the evaluation matrix from members of the committee? I'll just, oh, sorry, Diane, I think that's you.
Yeah. My question is, who did the ranking and the scoring on this chart?
Sure. That's so Dorn Whittier does the initial pass at the ranking, and then we have it reviewed with the leadership working group. And then if you notice, it is considered a draft still because we bring it to this committee to also review, so that if you do have any adjustments that you want to make to the scoring of the criteria, we will gladly take that into consideration and do that.
And I noticed, I remember at the last meeting, David Ragdale mentioned weighting. Was any of that put into this matrix?
So at this time, we have not weighted any of the criteria or the categories. If that was something that we wanted to explore further, we could look at that. But previously, we had tried to apply weightings during the PDP phase, and we found that it really wasn't making a difference in the scoring, in the overall scoring for the each of the criteria. For each of the options, and so we didn't apply the weighting at PDP, and so we haven't done it at this time either. But we could discuss that if we thought that there were certain categories that should be weighted.
Thank you.
Vivian, and then David again.
Ronnie, can you confirm if this matrix is consistent from the original matrix that we started in the PDP phase, and we're carrying the same scoring mechanism as well as this, the evaluation on which ones we're doing again, so that it's a fair comparison and an apples to apples from one version to the next?
Sure. Yes. So we used the same criteria, and we also used the same categories. So we did not change any of that from the PDP to PSR phase for consistency.
David, another question?
I think more comment here. I want to note that sort of looking at these categories, that for the last two, for consolidation and total time, that's essentially baked into the 3 grade spans to begin with. That you could have at least obviously we wouldn't have necessarily had these exact numbers, but you certainly could have kind of ranked them in this order without doing any particular research on it, because obviously, consolidating, all three schools together is going to be more consolidation than anything less than that. And the same thing with the total time to addressing all elementary school needs. If we deal with all the elementary school needs in one project on one side of town. So I'm kind of looking at mostly the things above that. So the first 6 categories to kind of really see kind of how the options compare to each other that aren't just baked into the pie from the beginning.
Thanks, David. Any other questions from members of the committee on the matrix? Okay, Ronnie?
Thank you. So this past month, our team has worked to shortlist for estimating the shortlisted PSR options. And we have provided the PDP cost and the PSR updated cost on this slide for you to see the changes from the previous phase. You may have noticed that the numbers have shifted in both directions depending on the option. In this estimate, you'll see that the adjustments included the reduction in the cost for the program square footage, being that it was reduced in this phase. And then also some of the changes in cost include the site cost, and that had a greater impact at this PSR phase, because at PDP, there's really not as much information developed at that time. And so a lot of the costs are based on a percentage of the building square footage, where now we have, more detailed site plans developed, site features that are illustrated or narrated, and then, site amenities, and then additional grading information that the estimator is able to use to develop a more detailed estimate on the site. And then the construction soft costs are more or less a percentage function of the cost of the building and the site. And so those just adjust up and down accordingly. But overall, the project costs experienced either an increase or decrease by 3 to 6% in the pre-K K and pre-K 3 options. And then the pre-K 5 options had a more significant decrease at closer to 8%. And one example for the reason for this is that the site of North does not have a significant grade changes. And so then there's less need for substantial retaining walls than at the Woburn and Wildwood sites. So where the Wildwood and Woburn sites had more of the retaining walls, and that increases the site cost, the North Intermediate site didn't have significant retaining walls. And so therefore, more of the site cost actually decreased.
Sorry, Lee, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. Certainly at Woburn Street, the site costs are increased. And just to give you an example of that, those retaining walls that we were illustrating on the site plans, they come with a cost of about $3.8 million of added site costs, over North, which doesn't have those retaining walls. There's also extra money at Woburn site for possibly running into ledge and large boulders, so over excavation. So those are baked into the numbers too. So we did see, the site cost increase in Woburn in this round of PSR when we did more detail, and we saw the site cost decrease from what we had estimated in PSR for the pre-K to 5 options.
Thanks, Lee. Ronnie, I would suspect we may have more folks in the community that are tuning in to this. Can you just remind everyone what PDP and PSR is, what that stands for, and what the differences are between the two?
Sure. So the PDP phase, the preliminary design phase, it's part 1 of the feasibility study with MSBA. And in PDP, we're really developing the program for the different options. In the case of Wilmington, we have 3 grade configurations. And so we're trying to understand the differences between the different grade configurations, the different sites, and looking at all potential sites as well, and studying all of the options, if you will, that are possible. So, you know, at each of the sites, we looked at each grade configuration and how it would fit onto each of the sites, which is why we had 18 options and 4 sites during the earlier phase. And then I also, you know, we always refer to it as drawing with a big fat Sharpie. It's very conceptual and high level. And when we get into the PSR phase, it's the preliminary schematic phase for, which is part 2 of the feasibility study phase. And we start to refine the details of the site and of the plan. And we are trying to start drawing with a slightly less fat marker, if you will. And, you know, it's still somewhat high level because we are still working through a lot of details. And there's a lot of information that we're still trying to understand and, you know, further develop in the next phase. But really the focus of feasibility study is just narrowing down the options so that we can put all of our efforts towards one option and develop that fully so that we can have a strong level of detail for cost estimating. And then that way the MSBA will then be able to review that and come to an agreement with the community on what they will consider a project to move forward and partner with.
Thanks, Ronnie. And again, I know members of the committee are certainly well informed of this.
She keeps cutting out.
Kevin, yeah, sorry, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Brand?
Kevin, you're actually cutting out. I
Can she
couldn't hear you
explain
there.
what the PDP and PSR are? Because she kept cutting out. I hate to have her do this, but what is the PDP and PSR? Because she kept cutting out. No.
We can try it again. I don't know. Did others hear okay?
I could hear it fine. I think Kevin might be cutting out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could try again, Kevin, just to help with, hopefully you can hear a little bit more this time, but more or less the PDP and the preliminary design phase and the preferred schematic phase are 2 parts of the feasibility study phase in which the community is asked to review all of the possible options and start narrowing down eventually to one option for further study and development into further detail for cost estimating and to move forward with the MSBA on one project. So it's meant to really study the program that's needed for the different enrollments, all of the potential sites as much as possible, and then narrowing down the options. So in the first phase, we looked at all of the options, we shortlisted, and then in the second phase, we continued to refine as much as we could, but it is still, you know, somewhat high level, and to provide additional information for the school building committee to narrow it down to one option to study in more detail.
Thank you. Thanks, Ronnie.
Sure. So we know that a lot of questions have been asked about how the cost is going to impact the community. And so we took a look at the 5 options that were shortlisted at PDP phase to give an idea of the potential cost to the community.
Dr. Brand, before we just go on to that slide, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
With the overall cost of the pre-K through 5, what is the dollar amount for the oversized gym? Do we have that figure yet?
Yeah, I can answer. That's a good question. We ran the numbers when we were calculating local shares through the process that MSBA uses with their 3011 forms, where they calculate where their caps are and where square footages are over what their guidelines are for, therefore they wouldn't reimburse. So when we run that through, the 6,000 square feet of extra square footage is multiplied by a 1.5 multiplier that you've heard us talk about before, which takes into account its contribution to the mechanical spaces, wall thicknesses, corridors, et cetera. MSBA calculates the 6,000 times the 1.5, so it's 9,000 square feet of ineligible space within the project. They calculate it at the overall project cost, and they take that out of what their eligible pot of money is. So their calculation has the gym at $8.3 million for that 9,000 square feet. But that's the way they calculate it based on the incentives on that side of the ledger, bringing it down. If you calculate it from a construction cost standpoint, it's a little bit less than that, obviously, when you look at the overall square foot for what we're building here. So it's not a straight line thing with MSBA. It comes on, we've included it in the cost, and they're taking it out based on the overall project cost and anything else that they see that it may impact, whether it's design fees or OPM fees or commissioning, for that space. They total all of that up. So that is the total value that they attach to that as ineligible cost, as an estimate right now that we're providing. And again, I'll just reiterate, and you've heard me say this before, right? These are all estimates right now when we're talking about MSBA's portion of this, and none of that gets finalized, right, until we submit a final schematic design package to the board of directors, and then we'll work out a contract with the town at that point before the town votes on executing a project. So these are, again, our best efforts right now to give you some tools to be able to help on some of this decision-making process. And certainly, the community-sized gym, is factored into that thought process.
Thanks, Lee. Marianne?
So just a follow-up question on that. So the 8.3 number, that wouldn't necessarily come off the total cost, correct?
Correct.
It's just more on the MSB reimbursement?
Correct. It's part of their calculation. The cost for the gym is already included right now in the cost estimate.
So how much is it to actually build the gym? Do we know?
It's approximately, the building, average cost per square foot is somewhere north of $800 a square foot. And if you apply that directly, to the 9,000 square feet, you're in the $5 million range when you're just looking at it from that standpoint.
It might be something that the committee needs to revisit. I mean, that is a big hit for a gym to not get that 8.3 back from the MSBA. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. Vivian, I see your hand raised.
I'll refrain. Thank you.
Okay. It is, thank you for raising it, Marianne, and thank you, Lee, for your response. And just again, thinking about those that might be in the community joining us, and we'll talk a little bit more about the large size gym that's included in this project. The reason that it is in the project to the present time is for a number of reasons. Feedback that started back in the fall with community feedback and input around the thought to have a full-size gym. Well, it's not necessary for educational programming for the size of school, even the pre-K to 5. I think it was largely understood by many and assumed, but there's nothing at all that is anything beyond an assumption that if a pre-K 5 school came online, the likelihood would be high that the other schools would down the road not continue to operate and may not even be standing. A decision that's not in the power of this committee, a decision that's not been made, but a recognition that more gym space in town for recreation programs and such could always be a good thing. This committee, the building committee, some time ago discussed this. It was some time ago now since, and collectively there certainly was the support to include it in the project, but I understand Marianne and others that they want to rethink that. Vivian?
Also, I believe it was under the decision or the guidance that since we're losing a gymnasium at the Woburn Street by selecting the North Intermediate, an oversized gym would help offset a lot of the community activities as well as after-school programming that happens at the two distinct gyms at the moment, and combining them together. Now you would need a larger gym for those purposes. The larger size gym would also be able to be divided into two, where you can run 2 concurrent after-school activities or 2 community-based events on the weekends, basketballs or whatever, team sports, in that larger gymnasium. Understanding that one larger gymnasium that we're incorporating into the North Intermediate site is to offset the loss at the Woburn Street site. Because if we made the selection to go with the North Intermediate, you can't maintain the building at Woburn just for the gymnasium. So you're in essence losing another gym space, and therefore the combined larger gym would help offset those. Does that make sense, Marianne?
It does, and I do remember that being discussed at a meeting when we did discuss it back then. However, I think for the price tag, it might not be a good bang for the buck. I don't know how much the Woburn Street gym is used. I think it's probably used more for our rec department running programs out of there, but it's something that I think, you know, as a committee and to the taxpayers, we need to probably revisit that and vet that out a little bit more.
Understandable. And it is yes, the MSBA would not contribute towards not the entire gym, but the larger portion of the gym. But if we were after the fact need a gymnasium, and in order to build a structure of that size, it would cost a minimum of 3 times more.
I understand that. Yep.
Yeah. So it's kind of the theory, at least here, was that if we're going to do it, let's do it once, let's do it right and see what it lands versus trying to kind of do it independently.
Right. Now, I remember the conversation we had and the points we made, but I think for the price tag, I'm just saying that it's something that maybe we should revisit. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. David, you have a question, and then we'll and then we'll move on.
Yeah, actually, just a quick request, which is that Ronnie, on the previous slide where we were looking at the difference between the PDP phase and the PSR, can you, before this slide deck is posted for us publicly, maybe make it a little bit clearer that the PSR is the more recent and more updated numbers? Because I think even though we just gave that explanation here, and as a committee, we've been working with these numbers, but any community member who is kind of looking at these slides afterwards, it might not be quite as clear which is sort of the most recent best numbers that we have. So maybe there's just a quick way to before we get these posted to our website to add that.
If I could just ask, we'll just allow Ronnie, we've got a few more slides here to get through, and then we can certainly circle back to questions that members of the committee have. Ronnie, I know you want to press ahead to the next slides.
So as mentioned, we did look at these potential local share by considering typical scope that would be eligible for MSBA reimbursement. And then, that number then is now reflected in that potential local share of the project. MSBA has caps on certain items as mentioned, whether it's site or different programmatic elements. And so all of that was factored in. But some of that is the reasons for, the difference in the delta of the estimate at the PSR phase and then what the local share is. And so, the delta is a lot larger in the North Intermediate site, but it's slightly less in Woburn and Wildwood if you were to just calculate it out. But that's just has to do with some of those caps that the MSBA has on the project.
I'll just add to that each of these individual options we calculated individually through this process with what we expect MSBA to potentially reimburse for. And each of these options come up with a different scenario just based on their cost, based on where they're located. As an example, those site costs that we talked about at the Woburn Street site, right, are driving up that site cost, higher than what's happening at the other sites. At the same time, MSBA puts a cap on site work, across all of those projects. So there's a larger portion of site work costs at Woburn Street that are not eligible as reimbursable costs as compared to the pre-K to 5 option. So you'll see, if you dig into the numbers, right, that each of the percentages of contribution from MSBA vary slightly between option to option, depending on how the math and analytics work.
Thanks, Lee.
So here, what we've done is look at the projects that would not, or the school sites that would not be impacted by the project, to calculate what the total local share would potentially be. For the pre-KK options, the project would not include the Woburn Street or the North Intermediate sites, and therefore we've carried their repair only calculation. Now, this assumes that there's no MSBA funding for those repair only projects, and it also assumes that all of the work would be done at one time. And so we've added that together, and you'll see that for pre-KK includes, like I said, the Woburn Street and North Intermediate repair only projects. For the pre-K3 option, it adds in the North Intermediate repair only for the $133 to $147 million in potential local share. And then the pre-K5 has taken care of the entire population, and therefore neither of the repair only projects are added in, and so that cost actually stays the same. So this is looking at kind of the long-term view for the community, and you know, it actually turned out that the pre-KK and pre-K3 options in the long term end up costing more than the pre-K5 option when you look at it from this perspective. The town.
Sorry, Ronnie. Vivian, did you have a specific question on this?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that it's clear that the repair only means bringing it up to code. Is that correct? That it's not really any major aesthetics or educational spaces. It's just window replacements, roof replacement, maybe mechanical equipment, some upgrades to that, and a little bit of just more in line of repairs in that manner, not necessarily meeting the educational spaces or adding any classrooms or anything.
Correct. So it doesn't address any of the programmatic needs. It solely is looking at the existing conditions of the buildings and bringing those up to code, and
right,
you know, the mechanical systems, all of the infrastructure, things like that. It is that capital improvements plan that was put together that we reviewed almost a year ago now, but it's that list.
And also, when you mentioned that it would be done in a singular phase, that also means that you're not, have you anticipated any escalation in that number? Or is this based off of today's dollars being carried forward in today's dollars, but the work might potentially be done 3 years from now?
So this is based on the same time frame as the project. So it's today's dollars, using today's market. We don't know when those projects would happen, you know, and so because of that, you know, we have not applied any sort of further escalation on it. And, you know, there is some phasing, you know, just because the sheer nature of the projects that, you know, these are occupied schools. So, you know, we do understand that they would need some sort of temporary classroom for, you know, portions of time to help alleviate space needs during construction. So some of that has been accounted for in those options. But overall, it's, you know, it's not phased over like 10 years or 20 years, for example. You know, it's
right, and it's not, it sounds
one project.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's not really escalated beyond the midpoint of construction where you anticipate that it cost for the original project to come in. So in essence, if we don't do the repair only options along with, I'm looking at, for example, the Wildwood site, right? The pre-K to K. If we don't make the Woburn Street repair only, as well as the North Intermediate repair only at the same time frame as we're doing the construction of the Wildwood, the cost is only going to go up with escalation.
Correct.
Yeah, just that's a great point, Vivian. And we made this assumption to try and provide. We looked at it as what is the fastest and least cost opportunity to be able to look at the entire pre-K to 5 population. It's really hard to compare a pre-K to 5 new option against, something that's only taking care of Wildwood. So we drew a line in the sand and said, our measuring stick for this is going to be baseline code to extend the life of those buildings, right? No educational improvements, just infrastructure and, patch and repair. And it's got a significant cost. And the detail of those costs is important because, as Dennis has told us many times, the town wouldn't want to execute, necessarily that project as a repair all at once. They may phase that out over, several years. But as you mentioned, Vivian, phasing that over several years is going to increase the cost from what we're showing it now. So we tried to say, what is the least cost to be able to compare against these options. So that was the assumption that was made. And there's certainly arguments that can be made about the repair project and how you execute those and over what time. But any way we slice that, they're going to get more expensive over time.
No, and I appreciate that. And thank you. I know it's difficult to compare it to an apples to apples when they're not in any way similarities at all. So I appreciate you taking the opportunity and the time to do it this way. I just wanted to make sure I understood it as well as my committee members understood that this is in today's dollars for just minor repairs to bring it up to code. That doesn't include in it if we don't do it all at once and if we don't do it at the same time that this construction project is happening, that there will be incrementally even more costs associated with it.
Thanks, Vivian.
So the town has taken time to generate estimated tax impact, and the town manager, I believe, is on. I can't see here on the. I believe the town manager is on to take you through that local tax impact information.
Thanks, Ronnie. I appreciate that. So this is just an attempt to lay out the potential tax impacts to the town, to the taxpayers, in a way that's kind of relatively simple to understand. So as you see from the screen in front of you, the first line is for the pre-K to K repair only at the Wildwood. As we've talked about before, the estimated total project cost is the midpoint of the range that was provided by our consultants, and the estimated local share at the midpoint of the range provided by the consultants. So the Wildwood repair only comes in at slightly south of $30 million. The annual debt payment for that amount of borrowing would be slightly over $2.1 million. It's important to note that these annual debt payments are on what's called a declining scale, which means the highest debt payment is in year one, and they're over 30 years. And so the payment in year 30 will be so the annual tax increase in that is approximately $160 for the average single family home, and that monthly impact would be $13. So a couple of that, Mary Ann, did you have something?
Yeah, Eric, when you were doing the calculations, does this include the commercial base?
No, this is just the average annual tax increase for the average single family home. So this is just the residential impact.
Okay.
Nick?
Question?
Well, mine was going to be for when you were done, Eric. Apologies.
Okay. All right. Well, I will try to get through this then. So again, the pre-K through K new at the Wildwood is slightly less than 90 million. The estimated local share is slightly over 66. Again, the annual debt payment is slightly less than 5 million. It's a $370 tax impact. Monthly impact is $31. The rest of this, again, it's fairly straightforward. It's just important to note that as Lee has mentioned many times, these are all based on estimates, our best information now. All the tax information is based on the current information we have. That's obviously not based on tax rates that would be in effect at the time that we do this borrowing, because those tax rates haven't been set yet. This is based on a 4% interest rate, which is something I discussed with Mike Morris, who's our acting finance director, as he believes is a reasonable rate. It's slightly over what we got the last time we did some borrowing, which is 3.75. So you know, I don't you guys can read it. You probably don't need me to go through it line by line. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to hear them.
Thanks so much, Eric, and thank you for your team's work on this. I know that hard at work behind the scenes on this, and much appreciated. Nick, you had a question?
Yeah, I got a clarifying question and then just a thought. But monthly impact here, that's average, right? Or is that like a
yeah? So all this is based on the annual tax increase on the average single family home. If you look down below, that's a $683,000 assessed value. So that monthly impact is for that tax bill. So if you're in the average home, that's the impact to the monthly impact on your average single family tax bill.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Marianne?
You're muted, Marianne.
So just as clarification, you took the middle line number. So if this project comes in, you know, up toward the 190 million, the tax will be higher, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, for clarification for the public, you know, this is just a middle of the pack, 185 million. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. So the reason why I did that is because, number one, I wanted to try to keep it simple, but number two, we could have an estimated project cost that goes up and a local share and a reimbursement that goes up, and it would still come out to the same number, right? We'd still get the same local impact. The same, we could have the project costs go down, but our reimbursement not also go down. So it would be the same impact. So that's why I tried to pick the middle to make it kind of more easily digestible. But that's a good point, Marianne. Thank you for pointing it out.
Thanks, Marianne. Vivian?
I was actually, Eric said it more eloquently than I was going to, but that the midpoint is preferred so that there could be more of an apples to apples comparison with it. And also, depending on the cost of the home, you know, if it's over the average home, the cost share will be slightly higher as well. That will make a difference too.
Thanks, Vivian. Before we move on in the presentation, are there any other questions from members of the committee for our town manager?
Thank you for putting this slide together and the work behind it. I think this is a great, you know, granted, we took a midpoint, which I agree in the logic of it, that this is a great way to illustrate the, you know, monthly impact to the taxpayers on all of the options. And it feels as though there isn't a huge significant difference between doing a ad reno at the north versus doing a new at the north site. And if you include that with the pre-K to 3 option new at the Woburn, there's about what, a $12 delta between the two on a monthly basis, which I understand is a, you know, there is a value to it, but it's far less than what I anticipated and expected.
Thanks, Vivian.
Dr. Brand?
I think that's Diane. Yes, yes, Diane, go ahead.
Hi. I'd like to ask the town manager, the costs and the tax impact going to be discussed at a public forum.
You're on mute.
I'm on mute. I'm not on.
You, Diane. Not you, Diane. Good.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna. I mean, we haven't talked about this specifically, but I would anticipate that this same sort of information is the kind of thing that we're going to roll out at the public forum to let folks see. Again, one of the ideas of doing it this way is to make it more digestible, so it's easy to understand. I don't know how other people think, but I think about my mortgage bill, and so that's why I put it in monthly, because that's the change you're going to see in your mortgage if you get your escrow taken out. So That's why I did it this way. So hopefully, however people are thinking about it, this will provide them some guidance as to what their best, how it's going to really impact them in the real world.
I think that's a good idea. And the other thing may be because most people, I think even at town meeting, are going to think about what the impact is going to be to their tax bill, as you just said. And maybe if you started at, say, the 683 and then went to, the $800,000 range or the $900,000 range. I mean, I see in the paper a lot of homes being even sold in the $1 million range. I know I did my calculations on my home on the pre-K through 5, and I was astonished and not happy. But I think most people are going to do exactly what you just said. They're going to look at their tax bill and they're going to see what the annual impact is going to be. And then they're going to say, what's that monthly impact that I have to add to my budget monthly to pay for this, whichever option we decide to go with. Thank you.
Okay, Ronnie, thank you, Diane.
Thank you. So we wanted to share some imagery that we are developing kind of in the background here. In part of our submission to the MSBA at the end of August will be a presentation for the MSBA in preparation for their board meeting. And in that presentation, we would be presenting information pretty specific to the preferred option, but we'll also be presenting, and there to answer questions on the educational plan. And they have asked for specific information, including some building massing and some character imagery, if you will. So, in the background, we are putting these pieces together because we will need this as part of the submission at the end of the month. And so we just thought we would start sharing this. We'll have more of this in the August meeting. But we started with the 2 new options for right now. The building massing is the pre-K 5 new at North. So just this gives you some context of this 3-story building in the fabric of the neighborhood, its positioning on the site, the circulation around the site, access points, and we have one more for pre-K 5, slightly different vantage point. So we're working on developing these in the background here. We also have 2 to share with you for the pre-K 3, the new at Woburn. This one's pretty important in that it tells kind of what's happening in that circulation piece in the back of the site on the west side where the bus or vehicle loop goes actually, underneath that overhanging piece of the building. You could see it. Let me get this to work. Yep, you can see it right here, how the vehicles pass under the building and loop around. This gives you another vantage point of that. You could also see this is where that pre-K drop-off is in the back of the building as well. This is that retaining wall. We're using this space for playgrounds and potentially for a smaller soccer field. So just to kind of give you a glimpse of what's happening in the background. For the schedule in August, we have several meetings coming up. The community forum is on August 7th. We will be using Mentimeter as part of that to ask questions, again, from the community. And we have intentionally given ourselves 2 weeks before the August 20th meeting for us to be able to leave the survey open or the questions and the presentation open for a week after the August 7th. For those that aren't able to attend on that night, they can still view and participate in the Mentimeter questions, and we will compile all of that and have that out to you prior to the August 20th meeting. The school committee will be going to, at their August 14th meeting, to review any changes to the educational plan, and then also discuss, grade configuration. The select board tentatively is August 19th, and a presentation on the project there. And then we'll get to August 20th, and that's when this group will reconvene and vote for a preferred alternative. And then potentially we have another school committee meeting. We don't know if we'll necessarily need a meeting for that, but just in case we do, once the preferred alternative is selected and voted on, the school committee does have to sign off on that if it is a pre-K 3 or pre-K 5 because of the change in grade configuration at the school. And then at the end of August, we'll be submitting the PSR submission to MSBA. So I'll turn it over to the Public Relations Working Group. I know it's the next agenda item, and for whoever is discussing that, I do have the results of the survey in this presentation. So if you want, I can run through that.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Justin, since they were working with the 4th of July Fun on the 4th committee to put together the booth. And I want to thank them and Christine for all their efforts and everybody else that volunteered and assisted at the booth during all the days of the carnival, and all your assistance, your patience, your willingness to participate and speak to so many members of the community and educating the community about the project. So thank you to all. And with that, Justin and Mike.
Justin, I'll go if you, if that's okay, as we discussed earlier. So thank you, Vivian. As we have some slides, as we'll get to, I think I just want to give an overall update. So as those of you know, we had a table, our booth, and the tent area at the back of the common on the Fun on the 4th. It spanned over 5 days from June 26th to June 30th. Over those 5 days, we had about a dozen volunteers from this community. We had quite a few representatives of the school committee, and then there was a couple individual community members who volunteered. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I thought from this being, this is one of the best events, I'd say, in town that the most amount of the community gets together. One of the biggest items I noticed over the course of both Wilmington Night, the first day, Family Day on the morning of the Saturday, and then the Farmers Market on Sunday, was each of those events was almost like a different crowd, a different group of people to talk to. I think we spoke to the most people between Wilmington Night and then over the course of Family Day on Saturday. But I think each night, every group of people that spent their 2 or 3 hours at the booth talked to dozens and dozens of people. I know I easily talked to 200 plus people myself. The number of votes we got, I think we got around 40 something people who submitted paper surveys, and close to 80 or 90 people who did electronic surveys. There was overall a lot of interest in consolidation. I'll also say that there was quite a few people who indicated they previously gave feedback before and they weren't interested in giving feedback now. And there were some people who also just weren't too interested in talking about the project that also declined to give feedback. I imagine their input could have balanced on both ends of the spectrum. Justin, anything you want to add about the event overall before we kind of go into the results?
The only thing I would add is the people that I spoke to seem to be largely from the west side of town. And I only mention this because I know it's come up in previous meetings that, this is all for the north. This is only going to benefit the north. But what was very interesting is that talking with the people from the other side of town was refreshing to hear that they were in favor of consolidation. They felt that it makes sense. They knew they weren't going to benefit from it right away. They knew that what happens on the north side of town will most likely get replicated on the other side of town, but that it made sense to them, and they were in favor of it, even though they weren't benefiting from it right away. So That was just one anecdote that stuck with me. Was that they knew that it wasn't for them right now, but they knew that it was the right decision to make, or I shouldn't say that. It was the consolidating was they were in favor of that, and they could see the benefit for the entire town when it was their turn, however long that may be in the future.
If I could add as well, Justin and Michael, I also felt in the conversations that we had, the feedback that we received, and I think it'll be self-evident as we move forward on the slides, was very much in line with all the other feedback we had been receiving through the various community engagement forums that we've held, and where Mentimeter was incorporated as part of the presentation to obtain as much feedback as possible. The input we received during the Fun on the 4th, all 5 days, seemed to be very consistent messaging from the previous community engagement forums that we've held.
All right, Ronnie, if no one else has anything to add about the event,
Actually, if I'd like to jump in real quick in this,
course.
because I did several shifts at the booth as well, and it was, I think, extremely valuable to talk to so many people, including some that had very little information about the project and were therefore actually quite surprised and alarmed in some cases that this was something that we were considering, because this is obviously a very large project that the town is potentially considering. And it just emphasized again that despite our best efforts to get the word out and to put the emphasis in the water bill and all the things that we've done, there are still lots of people who don't really know about it, and that we sort of just have to keep pushing it as much as possible to socialize what's happening with this project and make sure that people have the information that they need in order to provide useful feedback, because we can't get useful feedback from the community if they don't know what it is they're supposed to be providing feedback on. And so even though I heard a lot of great positive, constructive feedback, there was definitely also some people who were kind of just learning about it and just had some real concerns that I think it's also important for us to acknowledge.
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for that comment. And I'd have to say, from my perspective, that is not uncommon for this project as well as any other project in other communities. Majority of the people don't tend to pay attention until it becomes closer to the town meeting and the town vote timeframe, closer to like maybe the 8 weeks prior to it. But the fact that we're still very much engaged with the community at this point and maintaining the communication and the open line of communication throughout is very helpful to just get as much of the information out there as possible and to consistently deliver the same message, whatever it is, as we have it. And I think that will go a long way. So thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Vivian. Justin and Michael, thank you for your the context setting for this. And if you want to give some results to share next, right?
So the first question that was in the survey was if you were a resident of Wilmington. There were 133 people total that responded during Fun at the 4th, and 132 of those were residents of Wilmington. Do you currently have any school-age children in the system? 89 of those said yes, 23 said no, and 19 said in the future, or they currently were not old enough. Are you in favor of school consolidation? The majority said yes, 17 said no. The survey asked for folks to rank the options in order of preference. This was consistent with what we have seen in previous surveys, as well as the evaluation matrix when we compared it, where pre-K 5 options were at the top ranked, and the pre-K 3, and then that was followed by pre-K K.
Ronnie, if I could just add, so on this question, both the paper survey and the Mentimeter, most of the time somebody there was just offering input or help in doing the survey. We didn't want to know the results, we wanted the feedback. But many times we saw after that people either only picked one option on both the paper survey or the Menti survey. So while this is kind of the 1 through 7 ranking, I'm not sure we, with confidence can say 2, 3, 4, 5, or is a great breakdown, because in many cases, somebody only picked 1 or 2 options.
Thanks for clarifying that. The last question on the survey was about the larger gymnasium in the project, and that had the majority of responding surveys showed that there was the majority was in support of a larger gymnasium for the project.
I want to add, when we talked about this, I'm not sure how others answered. I know it would have been nice to have costs. I know we have approximate cost tonight. With my engineering construction background, I was estimating this is in the, mid $4 to $6 million range, but I only probably said that to a handful of people who voted yes or no. I'm not sure how others kind of explained it, but I think we did say it would be more than a few $1,000,000 to do this option. I think now that we have, a better idea of the numbers, maybe the community forum, this is a good one to emphasize and get as much feedback as we can then, or between now and the next month, our meeting.
Sure. Does Vivian or Julie want to take this one? This has to do with the frequently asked questions that are now being posted on the website.
Yes, I can jump in on this.
Sure, I can start it, and if Julie, you want to kind of take it over. We did receive a few questions, and we had formulated a frequently asked questions as well in preparation for the Fun on the 4th, so that everybody had the same information as well as delivering the same messaging, and where we appreciated Doran Whittier as well as SMMA helping us fine-tune those questions and answers in response. And the intent was not only to utilize it for Fun on the 4th to answer people's questions, the community members, but also afterwards to post it on the website and develop it further as we get more and more questions. And I think, Julie, you had some post, so I'll let you speak to those.
No, Vivian, I think you just got it all.
Oh,
thank you.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
So yeah, this is intended to be a working document and a living document. Therefore, it means that as we get more questions, we'll add them to these different categories, answer them to the best of our abilities and knowledge. And many times it might even be members of not this group, but the town, the finance committee, the select board that will need to respond to it in order to provide an adequate information to the community.
Thanks, Vivian. Thanks, Julie. And again, I think that's it, right, for the reporting out on the 4th. Thank you to all of the members of the committee and others that volunteered. I had an opportunity myself to be there, and it was a great chance to talk with many members of the community about this important project. So thank you very much for all of your time during that period. Ronnie, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that brings your presentation to a close, right? You've covered all of your material, a lot of information certainly tonight shared with the committee. Before we move on to latter portion of the agenda, I just want to make sure that there are no further questions from members of the committee for Ronnie, Lee, or Julie about the information presented tonight.
Dr. Brand.
Great, sure, go ahead.
I'll yield to Diane. Go ahead, Diane.
No, mine was just a quick question. And you may not have the answer right now. Maybe someone can find it out. I just wanted to know the size of the high school gym that we have at the high school.
Lee, do you have
someone has it?
It's the same size gym we're talking about.
12,000 square feet?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Is that Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just more of a suggestion. I wondered if, I really appreciated David's comments earlier about, regardless of what we do, there'll be some folks who are just not aware of what's gone on over the last couple of years. So I wondered if there's a spot on the website for that, where we could list off the measures we've taken to communicate this to the community. I know a lot's being done this summer in regards to being in front of the school committee and the select board in these meetings. And I just wondered if all of that could kind of be compiled in one spot. The great efforts of the folks who sat out there during the 4th of July and the newsletters and just kind of a little running list of the things we've done. I think that would be great if it was right on the website there under the projects tab there. That'd be great.
Yeah, great suggestion. I think we could probably compile those. I know we could compile those dates and a recap of the outreach efforts. Thanks for that suggestion.
Actually,
Vivian?
thank you, Greg, but yes, absolutely. And I think maybe putting a little bit more emphasis on it, but the MSBA also requires you to identify how many community engagement forums you have held in your submission package. So that will already be identified in our next submission, as well as on our website. Prior to the school building committee meetings, there's also a section that identifies the community engagement forums that we have held, as well as a link to those presentations. So we have tried to, maybe we could enhance that and give a little bit more information on the website to kind of satisfy the public that we have been putting in the effort. So thank you for that.
Great, thanks.
And as Vivian just mentioned, in our next submission, which is going in on August 29th, we do have 2 forms that need to be signed by the town. They signed by the town manager, they're signed by the superintendent, and they are signed by the school committee chair that list all of the community forums, all of the public meetings that we've held, which would include going before the select board. So those are all listed in that form. I would also like to let everyone know that we will be sending out a flyer inside everyone's water bills again this month. So they should be coming out in August.
Thank you, Julie. Any other members of the committee have questions regarding the presentation tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the item number 6 tonight, which is discussion correspondence, new items.
Dr. Byrne, real quick. So there's a couple more quick updates I could give on public relations working group that only.
Sorry, Michael. Sorry about that. Sure.
So as Julie noted, thank you, Julie, for dropping off the flyers yesterday. So the August 1st water bill will have another flyer in it. And we took feedback on the prior flyer and we made clear that this is options for all 3 sites. And Wildwood School Building Project is as minimized as possible to make clear that so anybody reading that is seeing the names of all 3 sites. We're working on outreach for the August 7th community forum. We know that the town website's already made a posting. Superintendent's office has always sent out some emails. And the Wilmington Apple is also already posted. Seeing that we're about 2 weeks out, we're going to be looking over the next week or so to repeat some of that advertisement, make sure flyers are in all the right locations. I know the library already has one, for example. And then where the pause is looking to do a couple of events between August and September that, they're going to do them on their own, but we're going to support them if they need any information. And we're also looking at some other tables or possible events that may be worth attending come the fall once there is one option. That's it. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Just real quick, have we followed up with the senior center as of yet for another presentation there?
Yes, I can respond to that. We have, and the preference from the senior center and the director there is to hold an event in September as opposed to August. And so we are, I have to look back. I can't remember, Julie, if we have a date yet, but we certainly are, we will have a date. We will
do
have a
not
date to
have a
follow.
date yet, but we have been posting in the senior center's newsletter. And so we submitted yesterday for their newsletter for August so that they will know that we are coming in September and to be looking in the September newsletter for the date in which we'll be presenting again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from members of the committee in terms of questions this evening? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Lee, for all of your work on that. Again, thank you to the town manager's office for your work on the tax implications. We appreciate that. We know that that's an important piece of this developing story for the community. Unless there's anything further from members of the committee, we're going to shift to item number 8, which is public comment tonight. We are broadcasting this live with partnership of WCTV, but we also have some members who have joined the webinar and therefore are certainly welcome and able to share their comments or questions or feedback to the committee on this project. Just a couple of things before we reach out to see if there's anyone who wishes to speak. We don't have a specific policy as a committee on public comment for these meetings, but to the extent that there's somebody here this evening would like to speak, I'd like to, as the chair, ask that we try and limit those to no more than 3 minutes. If you could kindly share your name and address. And if we are able to answer and respond this evening to your question, we will do so. If it's something that needs to take a little more time to gather information, then we will follow that up and bring that back to the, whether it be the community forum or the next meeting. So with that, if you are in attendance as one of the attendees tonight, you simply need to signal your desire to speak by raising your hand, the electronic hand, of course, and then Mr. Lord, who's helping us out tonight with the technical operation of this meeting, will allow you to have a live mic. So anyone here this evening who would like to comment or ask a question? Okay, I don't think appears like we have anyone who wishes to speak tonight. With that, as always, we will make the meeting tonight, the recording available, and we'll do our very best to push it out to the community. The presentation, the materials that were shared tonight will be also uploaded and made available. We will continue to work hard to make all of the information relative to this project as accessible as can be to members of the community. Thank you for some of the suggestions and feedback by members tonight to that end. So unless there's anything further tonight, that brings us to the last item of business. As a reminder, it's been mentioned a couple of times this evening. The next time that this committee will be have an opportunity to share an update with the community is on August the 7th at our community forum. And then our next building committee is August the 20th, as you know. So with that, unless there's anything further, looking for a motion to adjourn tonight.
So made.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, David. And with that, roll call. Oops.
Christine Pendergast.
Here.
Craig Minor.
Yes.
David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Dennis Kelly.
Yes.
Diane Allen.
Yes.
Glenn Brand.
Yes.
Greg Bendel.
Yes.
Justin Couchet.
Yes.
Kate Bissell.
Yes.
Kevin Kyra.
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo.
Yes.
Michael Camosio.
Yes.
Paul Millerani. Oh, sorry. Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Judy O'Connell.
Yes.
Nick Golden.
Yes.
Eric Schlegel.
Yes.
And yes, myself. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.